On track, we had action right up until the final lap. Off track, after the checkered flag, there was more drama. Belgian Grand Prix winner George Russell was disqualified for having an underweight car, so that promotes Lewis Hamilton to the win, Oscar Piastri rises to second place, and Charles Leclerc takes third. Welcome everyone to F1 Nation's review of the Belgian Grand Prix. I'm Tom Clarkson, and with me are Aston Martin reserve driver, Belgium's Stoffel Vandoorne, and 9-time Le Mans winner Tom Kristensen, who also presented the Constructors' Trophy on the podium here at Spa-Francorchamps. So, Russell has been disqualified. Let me very briefly explain why. The cars are weighed after the race to ensure they weigh more than the minimum weight, which is 798 kilos, 1,759 pounds for our American listeners. And Russell's W15 Mercedes was found to be 1.5 kilos under the weight limit. Now, racing drivers, explain to me what 1.5 kilos means in terms of performance. Stoffel.
People might think it's not a huge amount, but actually it means that through the whole race he's probably been carrying 1.5 kilo less weight into the car. And actually when teams start calculating that in terms of lap time, that's probably maybe a few seconds during the whole race. Another thing is that weight is non-negotiable. When the car is underweight, you get disqualified. So yeah, not a big surprise, to be honest.
Tom, this had been such a brilliant victory by George Russell. Just, how difficult is a moment like this for him?
It's devastating. I mean, Mercedes were, to their own admission, nowhere on Friday, and then they're blindingly fast. I mean, Lewis Hamilton off the line well, and leading the race. And then George came from a little bit out of the blue. I mean, okay, there was this radio message, can you do, shall we go a one stint? And he was ready to do that immediately. And that really paid off. He surprised the entire field. And that victory was so sweet and so good. And I believe he would have won anyway, apart from, 1.5 kilo. But when you get more than that, of course, it has a little issue. But I would just say it is a limit. And a limit, if you are below the limit, you have to be thrown out. That's the rules, and they are strong. So I feel for George Russell.
Taking Russell out of it for a second, what did we learn about the Mercedes car this weekend? Because it was nowhere on Friday, and yet it was the car to beat in the Grand Prix.
Yeah, correct. I think they had a difficult Friday, but when you look at Lewis's season, he often has difficult Fridays because he's a driver that likes to try to play with the car setup, to play with the tools in the car, to really get an understanding of how the systems are working. And I think once comes Sunday, he really gets his mind into the zone. He knows, okay, this is the car he's going to get available to him. And he's just dealing with that. And, we've seen Lewis often much stronger on race day than, let's say, his qualifying performances, although they're still very good. I think he's an outstanding racer. He has an incredible feel for the tires. And so did George, obviously, today as well, managing the tires perfectly, crossing the line first. So I think this result came a little bit as a surprise to Mercedes as well.
Win number 105 for Lewis Hamilton, Tom. I mean,
the fifth victory here in Spa, it then became.
Yeah, and it's funny, the greats do win at this racetrack, don't they? Michael Schumacher 6, Senna 5, Lewis Hamilton 5. There's something about this place.
There's no doubt. He did well, and he would probably also like to have done the race a little different because he was disappointed on the podium, no doubt. Now he's a Grand Prix winner again, but the circumstances, it's always, it also matters for a driver. But nevertheless, Mercedes are really back in the game again, and you can see the whole team, the whole vibe, just when they cross the finish line. And there's confidence in the team again. For 2 years, they have been really sometimes crawling out of the paddock.
Third win in 4 races. I think they deserve to have that confidence.
No doubt. I mean, this was a 1-2. I would, call it a 1-2. I know it doesn't count, but in the end of the day, they were racing for 1-2 today. I mean, Austria, we know, was a little different. There was a little contact with Max and Lando, creating the opportunity there. And probably also at Silverstone, of course, Lewis took it very much, but probably McLaren could have done a little bit better strategy, and maybe Lewis would not have won. But here, they won. They qualified well in the wet. They took all the things they could of the tools and in terms of strategy, and they made a 1-2. I know it's not a 1-2, but it was great racing.
It was 1-2 on the telly, but of course before the disqualification. Stoff, can I ask you about George Russell? First time you've been on the pod this year. Have you been surprised by him? Because he's had the edge on Lewis in qualifying. He's now had 2 wins. This one doesn't count in the history books, but in terms of how he executed this Grand Prix, it was a brilliant drive by him. Do you think he's at a different level this year?
It certainly looks like, and your question, am I surprised, yes or no? I think my reply is yes, but also no, because George, he's a guy that won in all the junior series that he came through, so he's obviously very talented. Had a couple of years at Williams and was showing already incredible qualifying pace. I think already Mercedes back then, they could really see, how fast he was and what pure speed he had. But they also saw how good he was at managing tires. So that is something that George, he had it already. I think he has it naturally in him to manage the tires well. So then obviously he came into Mercedes, and probably that puts the pressure to a whole different level. You're stepping into the team next to Lewis Hamilton, who is, the driver that broke all these records. But he's held up incredibly well. He's, kind of consistently qualified very well since almost since day one he's arrived in Mercedes. And yes, he had his rough patches where he had this crash in Singapore. I'm sure there's some other races where he had his couple of glitches, let's say, but he's maturing, and he's very much delivering week in, week out.
So I think we all agree that Mercedes are going to be a force in the second half of this season. Let's bring it on now to McLaren, to Oscar Piastri, who with Russell's disqualification takes P2 after winning his first Grand Prix in Hungary. Here's what the Australian made of his race.
Pretty happy on the whole. We executed a great race, had a quick car, and ultimately just didn't put it in the right position in qualifying yesterday. So I think, given where we started, very happy. But ultimately I think there was a bit more potential this weekend.
Do you think this is one of your best races in Formula One to date?
I would say so. I'm not sure my front jack man agrees, but no, I think it was a really strong race. I think to try and get past Charles was not easy, and I think if I didn't manage to do it on that lap, I probably would have been stuck there for a long time. So that was a pretty pivotal moment of the race. I think just the pace was very strong. So I felt very, very good this weekend. Even on Friday, the pace looked really strong. Just kicking myself a little bit that I didn't get qualifying right. But yeah, I think it was a very strong weekend, and probably one of my better races.
Tom, were you surprised that Piastri wasn't able to put himself in the mix for the win in the final stages?
I was surprised that Mercedes was so strong. I didn't expect that today, so I was surprised on that side. So, but Piastri was strong here. We already learned that last year in his first year with McLaren. He was very strong here at Spa, and so the way the race unfolded right from the go, Lando were running wide at turn 1 and losing positions. So in that sense, as a driver in a team, he was the only one up there at the very front. And I thought he was going to get closer, but as the race gone to a half, I already could see that Lewis Hamilton would win it. At the same point, a few laps later, I realized if George stays out, it's going to be close. But it took me a long way into the race to see that.
And Oscar's tyres were only 1 lap older than
Yeah.
George Russell's.
But Oscar was asked on the radio, how are you holding up? What do you think with the tires? What are we doing? And he replied rapidly, I think we stick with plan A, stick with plan A. So it was not in his thought of doing a one-stop.
But how much experience do you need to be able to do a one-stop on these Pirelli tyres? Because Oscar, I feel, he's just getting better and better. He's like a fine wine, isn't he? And we don't know what the ultimate limit for him is going to be. But I think tyre management is one area where he's making more and more progress.
Yeah, he definitely made a good step in the last couple of races, and I think up until a few races ago, that's probably the area he was lacking still a little bit compared to Lando. But in the recent races, there was virtually nothing between both of them in the race conditions, and those races experience definitely does help. But I think today there was also an unknown factor. There was a lot of parts of this racetrack have been resurfaced, and it's changed massively on the tire behavior. So I think for everyone it was a little bit of an unknown, and everyone had to feel for their own how the tires were coping on the new surface. And it turned out
grippy surface.
A very grippy surface, and it turned out the degradation was less.
What does that do to tyre wear and tyre deg, a grippier surface?
Basically, the surface is smoother. The old surface here is like sandpaper almost. Like it puts so much heat, energy into the tires, and this circuit has always been known as a very high energy circuit where the tires go off very quickly. But a couple of key corners have been resurfaced, and that's reduced the energy on the tires a lot during these races. And I think that's why the one-stop really had a very good chance today.
So why did more people not do it? I mean, I'm being an armchair strategist now, and I'm very good at that. I appreciate
Alonso did it.
Alonso did it, of course, with your Aston hat on. But they were the only two in the top 10.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were probably focused on racing each other and trying to cover each other off, rather than probably thinking, how does the tire actually feel? And I think that's also why Lewis probably feels a little bit annoyed after this race, because he felt the tires were good, but he probably wasn't vocal enough that they could go longer on the tires and try the one-stop.
And there was the fact that they knew probably that some will not do it, like Red Bull, because they only had one set of hard tires. So that's also into the equation. And then yesterday was a wet day, so they didn't have all the data, were not all prepared into a race, which turns out to be at least 10 degrees warmer on the track on coming race day Sunday.
TK, that's a good point. How much of an unknown from a track condition point of view was it for the teams because of all the rain we've had this weekend?
They would expect it to be harder on the tire, because when it goes green, let's say that when it's washed off, the rubber is washed off, and as Stoffel explains about the energy of this circuit, there's quite a lot of very long corners here, and that of course keeps the heat on these tires, and also you will be very fragile to graining. And of course, that immediately everyone was talking, it's going to be a two-stop. And I think even somebody, if you ask them, they would probably even think it could be a three-stop if you ask some of the teams before the race today, in my mind.
What about Lando Norris? He comes home fifth with George's disqualification, but he lost 3 positions in the first 2 laps. He seemed very down after the race. I felt he made a mistake at turn 1.
I think he lost the most. No, Stoffel?
Yeah, in turn 1 he ran a little bit over the rumble strip.
And there's gravel now.
Lost momentum, and then with the speed difference, lost a couple of places there. And I think he'll be kicking himself because, after qualifying on pole in Hungary, losing the lead in lap 1, and looking at the stats of his lap 1. They've not been very good recently, let's say, so he'll definitely be very annoyed by that. And, it just puts yourself in such a difficult condition after lap 1, because ultimately after that you had the top 4 teams fighting it out. They were very closely matched, and they were just fighting in a DRS train.
I was really surprised that Lando didn't start higher up. I mean, McLaren were 1-2 in Friday practice, and then when the rain came on Saturday, I was reminded of 2021 when, okay, he had a big accident at Eau Rouge in the end, but up until that point, he was ludicrously fast in the wet conditions around Spa. He loves this place, and yet Saturday, Sunday, I felt he never quite got into a rhythm with that car around this racetrack, which I was surprised at, and I think he is disappointed by that as well.
Yeah, no doubt it was powerful that he lost out in the beginning, and in the DRS train he was very vulnerable. He was in dirty air. It was very tough for him, but qualifying, I think qualifying was outstanding. Max, if we had the first in Q1, he goes out and his first flying lap, boom, was it 1.5 seconds faster than anyone, and that saved them a tire. That saved Red Bull a tire the whole. So they were on the upper hand the whole time. But of course, with his 10 grid penalty, you would expect to have seen Lando and the McLaren further forward. But actually, it was Charles Leclerc, but it was also Lewis who was a bit disappointed not to be at least ahead of Checo Perez.
Tom, you mentioned Max Verstappen, and let's just talk in a little bit more depth about that. That 1.5 seconds in Q1. How difficult is it to find the limit immediately?
Confidence.
Yeah, it's and I wouldn't just look at qualifying. Just look at his very first lap of the weekend. He was like 2 seconds clear of everyone. Max is absolutely flying around this place. He loves this track, and he is just super confident with the car. He knows exactly what to expect. And already from lap 1 this weekend, he looked like, he was going to be the candidate for pole position. Of course, very different conditions in qualifying, but in the wet, he was just outstanding. He has this natural feel with the car to make it happen on lap 1.
And he did gain positions on lap 1 in the race. I still felt he was on for a podium. I was surprised he didn't make his way through. Maybe
the progress was not as much as expected.
Well, why do we think that was? Do you think the DRS zone being 75 metres shorter than last year, is that a factor?
That's a factor. And the fact is that team have caught up. Teams are better. You see his DRS is not as powerful as it used to be. That's clear. I mean, of course, there's a little bit of different air configuration. I'm not a technician in that sense, but of course, having wet yesterday and racing today is a little compromise being made with a few things. But in generally, the Red Bull is not as strong car as it was, certainly not as last year, and it's not as powerful when he gets into DRS.
Well, and it's now 4 races without a Max Verstappen win, and we haven't said that for a while, have we?
No, it's us loving the sport from the side or from the outside or wherever we are. I mean, it's great. Formula One has never been closer in that sense, and it's nice some unpredictable times. I mean, as I said, I didn't expect Mercedes. I would not have put my money on Mercedes, certainly not after Friday.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty now, that every weekend between those 3-4 teams, they're so close together that if one team just, nails it, they're on to win the race. If you don't nail it, you pay a big price now.
Yeah, you need to make a good first lap as well. You don't need to overshoot the pit stop. I mean, we saw that actually Oscar Piastri was very close on that one.
But he actually said something in the press conference about that. He said that his first pit stop, because Lewis had been coming out of his pit box, he said he undercooked it and he had to let the brake off and to get to his marks. Yeah. So he overcooked it. He just said I came in too hot for that second one, and then the front jackman took the brunt of it.
Yeah, but he got a few seconds of fame there afterwards when he was a bit hurt, but not more than he put on a big smile, which was good to see.
In terms of the pecking order, in terms of teams, do we think, okay, Mercedes had the fastest car in the race, or was it McLaren?
That's actually very close. I would say it's difficult to say, very, very close, but I would say before this race, you would say that the first 14 races coming into a status now, McLaren has a little bit the upper hand. And I think they have. Also, when you look at it's different, very different circuit dynamics from Hungary to here. But when you look at all the last 4 different circuits, they are also different. And then I would I would say McLaren. But there's no doubt that the confidence in a team and the delivery from the two drivers of Mercedes is getting there. And Ferrari was also happy to be a little bit faster and back again. But are they really, when you look at where Max Verstappen started from?
Look, we'll come on to Ferrari in a minute. Red Bull felt like a one-car team again today. I thought from P2 on the grid, this was a golden opportunity for Checo Perez to prove his worth. I thought his confidence was up after qualifying, and yet it was underwhelming again. And he finished 8th on the road, 7th after Russell's disqualification. Okay, he put on some soft tyres at the end and got fastest lap for the team. That's another point for the team. Do you think this is his last race for Red Bull?
I really don't know anymore what to think, to be honest. But yeah, it was a pretty underwhelming race, I would say. I think he kind of hung in there in the first stint of the race, but as soon as the first pit stop got done, the gap just kept increasing lap after lap. So he didn't do Max any favors as well at some point. I think, the team probably could have played a little bit of a better game to give Max the clean air. He would have had an undercut on some people that he was fighting. So yeah, I would say wait and see. Apparently Helmut Marko is having a meeting.
Well, not more than that. I've actually just spoken to someone at Red Bull, and it is happening. Ricciardo and Lawson are driving a 2-year-old V-carb at Imola this coming week. I said, is it a shootout? And the guy said, I wouldn't call it a shootout. Well, I'm not quite sure what it is if it's not a shootout. But
they're not in the car at the same time, at least. But there's no doubt that there's 5 drivers at Red Bull with the 2 cars, and Tsunoda is safe. Verstappen is safe, and there's only 2 other seats. So. Is that happening just for the RB car, or is it also in terms of the Red Bull car? That could be the next question. But I would say, it's tough for Checo Perez also to know that a faster car is coming from the back. It's tough to deliver, but he has not been consistent enough. And it was great to hear him yesterday in qualifying on the in-lap. Hey, let's kick some ass tomorrow. But I think Stoffel is right. That's not what he did. But it's... he's not scoring enough to deserve the place on the long term. So it's just a matter of when, but we have said that a long time.
Look, you use the word confidence to describe Max Verstappen being able to go out and set a Q1 lap 1.5 seconds faster than anyone else. Is it a lack of confidence? Is that Checo's problem?
Probably also it's the whole environment. If you start to get into your head that you're struggling, you're not doing it right, what do you need to do better? And sometimes you also will overdrive. You will also overdo it because you need to do well. And sometimes overdriving and actually can really hit you hard in the feet as well.
I think also the game just has changed. Like, you now have 4 teams that are fighting very closely together. And before, when the Red Bull had such an advantage, even if he was a little bit behind Max, he was still P2 on the road. Now, all these cars, or there's 8 cars within a couple of tenths of a second, and if you're a little bit off, you're suddenly 8 on the grid. So I think Red Bull having such a big advantage last year kind of helped Checo a little bit as well. And then everything becomes a little bit easier because you're, kind of just focusing on your teammate. You don't have to deal with the pressure of all the others around as well.
But Red Bull needs somebody scoring more points in to retain the constructors'
Especially
title,
right
and
now.
that's very important. And everyone else, the teams we talk about, they can really smell the glory of taking a constructors' title away from Red Bull. And there's nothing more that they wanted to do than that.
Now, Ferrari. Charles Leclerc starts on pole, as he did last year, and this time with Russell's disqualification, he ends up P3. The Ferrari, like the Red Bull, seem to come alive in the wet conditions here. Can one of you explain why a car can be so good in the wet round here and yet in the dry conditions fade?
I think Charles is an incredible qualifier, and he always in Q3 somehow manages to make this special lap, and he did it again in the wet conditions. I think it was a really good lap from Charles in the wet. But ultimately, I think Ferrari are still a little bit behind. Actually, if you look the gap to the top, it wasn't that far, but I think they're just a little bit behind. And I think Charles often manages to do something special in Q3, qualify that car a little bit higher than where it maybe should be, but ultimately they're still lacking a little bit of pace.
I think he did a good race, and actually Carlos starting on the hard tire. Everyone started on the medium more or less, but him starting on the hard, and then he was leading as he was going long. And were they thinking about a one-stop there? Normally it would be the other way around, but he was on the hard and made a mistake at Stoffel, and I lost him at least, I don't know, 5-6 seconds at least. But they were racing okay, but I that's why I think that they're just a little bit behind the other three, if you say top teams.
Were you surprised that more drivers didn't start the race on the hard tyre?
Not really, but I mean, who was it more? There was Tsunoda, and maybe there was Hülkenberg. I think not even.
And Ricciardo was on the soft.
Yeah.
But at the front, all the front runners are on the medium.
All the medium, apart from Sainz.
I think it just gives you the most flexibility to then convert to a one-stop
By starting on the medium.
By starting on the medium, yes.
But it would give Ferrari the chance to have done it, maybe, because obviously they will have the info on Carlos to do it on Charles.
Now we have a man dressed in green. Stoffel. Are you excited, by the way? You're doing 2 days of testing in the car here at Spa, starting on Tuesday.
I'm very excited. I mean, I don't have a lot of opportunities to drive a Formula One car as a reserve driver, so to be able to to get 2 days is fantastic, and to do it in Spa, it's my home country as well. It's definitely one of my favorite circuits. I'm going to have a lot of fun out there.
What do you think is going to be the biggest surprise for you?
The biggest surprise is just getting your brain rewired, because these cars, nothing prepares you for it. They're so fast. They produce so much downforce. The cornering speeds, you don't experience it in any other car. And I do race some other fast cars.
You're racing in WEC, you're racing in FE. And is this just a completely different galaxy?
When were you last time in an F1 car?
It was exactly last year, here as well, but it was wet.
Did it feel quick in the wet?
It felt quick. Because even in the wet, these cars produce a lot of downforce. Okay, the low speed corners, they are slippery and you feel the weight of the car. But as soon as you go above 200 kph, they produce a lot of downforce. And even in the wet, it was still impressive compared to anything else.
Well, what about the race for Aston Martin? Because, I mean, Alonso back in the points, but Lance Stroll came on the radio and said he had poor straight line speed. He had a crash, of course, in FP3 just before qualifying. Just how's the weekend been? Is there a bit of frustration building?
It was a difficult one. I think we all expected to have a little bit of a more competitive weekend. Just because of our characteristics with the car, we thought we were going to have a little bit better straight line speed, which ultimately it didn't turn out. We had great straight line speed. So we were kind of just a bit on the back foot. And I would say with Fernando, we were a little bit in no man's land. So he was kind of, how we call it, he kind of had a victory of the second group of teams, let's say. So ultimately we were quite far behind the leaders and just ahead of the remaining teams, let's say. But unfortunately that's the reality we're in right now. We're kind of in that area where we're quite far from the leaders. We're maybe just a little bit ahead of the others. But there's a long road ahead of us.
What about that road? We've got 10 races to go. Is the team I mean, Alonso said in Hungary that all he wants from the second half of the season is to get the team on the right path so that he can have, I think he said, a normal season in 2025. Are we close to getting on the right path with this car?
I don't think we're just there yet. I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but we can still do an awful lot in the second part of the year, like Fernando said, to make things better for next season. I mean, pushing through upgrades is hard, but I think it's more about the understanding of the philosophy of these cars, what it needs, what characteristics it needs, and I think that's where the top teams are doing very good right now. Is they know which areas to tackle, they know what to improve, and for us sometimes we bring things that work, we bring things that doesn't quite work, and that's probably the area we need to focus on.
From Aston, are you using your own wind tunnel now? Because I believe that there was maybe a correlation from when you were using Mercedes for the Aston Martin racing. Is there a correlation there, or is there anything there which maybe is...
So the new wind tunnel is not ready yet, so we're not using it yet. It's gonna, I think by the end of the year, we'll probably be in a position to use that one, which obviously will be a big benefit for the team. But also in the beginning, that's going to be challenging because it's a new tool that we're going to have to use. So there's going to be different way of working within the system, let's say. So it's not going to be better from day one. We're building a new sim as well, which is going to be ready towards the end of the year as well. So we're really putting all the possibilities there to be a successful team in the future. But I would say, probably next year is where we need to build a very strong foundation for 2026, because 2026 is a big year.
Regulation
change. We have Honda coming on board with the team. That's going to be a huge challenge, and that's where we, I think, have an opportunity to create something special.
Huge opportunity. Now, one other team that is building for the future, let's put it that way, Alpine. Flavio Briatore came in as executive advisor at the Spanish Grand Prix a month ago. This weekend in Belgium, ironically 12 months on from when Otmar Safnauer was released by the team, Bruno Famin has now announced that he'll step down as team principal. So they're getting through their team principals there, but Flavio will tell you that it's all about building for the future. And Ocon did put it, P9 in the results after the disqualification for Russell. The car does seem to be getting better. Let's talk about the race first of all. Given that car has a power deficit and this is a power track, you could argue that chassis must be making progress.
I think they have a very efficient aero package for a track like this, because the Alpines were flying on the straight this weekend. They were very fast. Their race pace was actually not bad, and I think Esteban maybe could have done the one stop as well. There are some circuits where they are kind of in the game, let's say, but they seem to have quite a big swings between one circuit and another one.
Tom, let's talk about the team structure at Alpine now. You have won Le Mans 9 times. You know how important the team aspect is in motorsport. How disruptive is a constant change? A revolving door at the top of a team. How disruptive is that to everybody below?
In the short term, it's of course a setback all the time. I would imagine. Obviously, things are happening for reasons, and they have at the moment the reasons are likely that the Renault engine won't be supplied maybe in the long term when you go into the new regulation. So probably it's already what you're seeing happening is how they are going forward and really thinking for 2026, I imagine. But yes, it's disruptive, but sometimes management at the high of these big manufacturers, when they are changing, they tend to want to have a clean line with the people they set a team, and having a dialogue with who they trust and believe in. And yes, there are some changes now. There's rumors about Ollie Oakes, the high-tech boss, will come in and lead a team. So things are already materialized. It's not official yet, but looks like that's the way we are going. Gasly is safe for next year, has a contract. Who will be in the second car?
They want Sainz.
They want Sainz. They want Doohan. I mean, everyone at the moment wants Sainz. There's just a few teams left, of course. So that's going to be interesting to speak about the driver market as well. But Alpine, I don't see exactly the direction. I understand the changes. I love Bruno Famin from Le Mans when he was there with Peugeot. He's an old school man, but you could also see that he little bit kind of saying it's time to give the what do you call the post to somebody else.
Pass the baton on.
Pass the baton on due to the thing which is going on. He tried for 1 year to do the best, and I think, as Stoffel said before, they have done some pretty good results. Even they started terrible at the beginning of the year, probably with an overweight car and whatever, but they have been very good, and probably they would have both had got points in Monaco if they didn't run into each other. That has also been a little backfire with the two French drivers.
Well,
in
and
the team.
we saw Bruno's temper in Monaco, didn't we?
Yeah, there he was on fire.
And of course, actually, Ocon was in the line of fire at Monaco, and he's now announced this weekend that he's going to Haas, who continually punch above their weight, it seems.
Yeah, I think the last couple of races for Haas have been, very impressive actually. And
well, between Monaco and Hungary, Nico Hülkenberg scored more points than Charles Leclerc.
that's impressive.
Hülkenberg
With the help of Kevin at some point. But I mean, this weekend they were struggling actually here in Spa. But I think that car is, and Nico as well. He's a qualifying animal. I think he's been very impressive in qualifying. But the car also, I think historically they've been very good at qualifying, and they have always struggled in the race pace. And I think that's something where they've made a massive step compared to the last couple of years, is they've managed to cure their tire degradation, and
I think it really happened in the beginning of this year, the pre-test in Bahrain. They really made a completely focus on the II or Komatsu. They really focused on the technical, just about the race pace. And they were more or less dead last every day at the pre-test, and of course everyone was worrying. But when you then came and they actually had the first Sunday there, it went on, and you could see that the whole team also came alive, and Nico and Kevin are doing very well. But I agree, Nico is probably driving the best ever in his life around this qualifying. I know it's many years ago, maybe it was 2012, I don't know, you can tell me, Tom, when he was on pole with the Williams in Brazil. 2010, yeah.
Interlagos, 2010.
Exactly.
In wet, dry conditions, actually. It was a drying line, I seem to remember. Yeah, Hülkenberg on fire.
On fire. I would like to get him a little bit better off the line. I mean, the first laps, I have to say, Kevin has always been super strong, and then they raced pretty close together on Sundays. But Hülkenberg's point score has been very impressive for Haas.
A former Le Mans winner himself, 2015.
So he has to be good.
Yeah, of course. With Russell's disqualification, the top 10 looks like this. Lewis Hamilton takes his 5th win at Spa and his 2nd of the season. Oscar Piastri is 2nd, giving McLaren their 10th podium in a row, and Charles Leclerc is 3rd for Ferrari. Max Verstappen is 4th, his lowest finish at Spa since 2019. Norris is 5th, Sainz is 6th, and Perez is 7th, after also taking the fastest lap. Alonso finishes 8th for the 2nd time in 3 races. Ocon gets his best result of the season in 9th, and Ricciardo is the last of the point scorers in 10th. In the Drivers' Championship, Max Verstappen has extended his lead at the top to 78 points. Norris is 2nd, 22 points ahead of Leclerc in 3rd. Piastri is 4th, just 10 points back from Leclerc, with Sainz 5 points off Piastri in 5th. 6th is Belgian winner Lewis Hamilton on 150 points, 19 ahead of Perez in 7th. Russell is 8th, Alonso is 9th, and Stroll is 10th. In the Constructors' Championship, the top 3 are closing up. Red Bull lead the way on 408 points, with McLaren 2nd, just 42 points adrift, and Ferrari 3rd, 21 points back from McLaren. Mercedes are 4th on 266 points, and then there's a huge jump back to Aston Martin in 5th on 73 points. And then it gets close again. VCarb are 6th on 34, Haas are 7th on 27, Alpine 8th on 11 points, Williams are 9th on 4, and Sauber have yet to score. Well, guys, it's been brilliant to have you both on the show. Thank you for your time. We always end with our driver of the day. And I think for the sake of driver of the day, we can include the man who won the race on the road, if you so wish. But Stoffel, who is your driver of the day here at Spa? You're having to think about this.
This is a really hard one.
Is that because so many drivers did a good job today?
I think so, yes. I think it was such a close finish. I'm going to have to say George because he was firm on his decision and he made it work with the strategy, with the tire management, and managed to hang on to victory.
If he hadn't made it work, if Hamilton had passed him, would he still have been your driver of the day?
I think he would have been definitely up there because I think in the position he was, if he did a two-stop, he was going to be stuck in this P5 region, and switching the decision to go to one stop definitely would have given him a better result, and it gave him the victory. Even if he didn't win, I think he would have finished on the podium 100%.
Tom?
I think he sold that very, very well. I will also say George, but if Lewis had passed him in the end, I would have gone for him because it was close between those two, and Lewis realized it probably late that he was going to race a one-stopper, and he did that well. He then won the Grand Prix.
I'm going to say Hamilton because, of course, George was brilliant. He was brilliant, but I think it was a punt, that one stop. And actually, if you're looking purely at driving, I thought, Hamilton made a brilliant start.
No doubt he was fast in the first 10 laps.
Duking it out with Perez down the run to Eau Rouge. He's nearly 40, right? And he is so feisty still. And then, he passes Leclerc on lap 3. He's utterly brilliant in those opening stages. And I thought he had the race won at that point. So
yeah, but then the silent assassin, George Russell, came and made a one-stopper work. So I would say George 2 against 1, but Lewis a very, very
I don't mind
very
you
good
disagreeing
race.
with me. That's fine.
So it's open.
It's our last time on the podcast, by the way, Tom.
Anyone can have their say, have their idea.
How much harder is it for Lewis, the fact that Russell made the one-stop work, his teammate? If Oscar Piastri had made a one-stop work and won the race, would that have been easier for Lewis to accept?
Yes, sure. But on the other hand, I like that it was communicated that they were open to race. And of course, that box is open due to the fact that Lewis Hamilton is going to Ferrari at next year. So I think that is also playing in the whole thing of that, you can say, intra-team fight there is. But I think it's just for us. It's just lovely to see. And as we are both close in putting them as driver of the day, that means they have both done a sterling job under the pressure.
And Lewis Hamilton, winner of the 2024 Belgian Grand Prix. Well, guys, thank you very much. Stoffel, great to see you.
Thank you.
Have a great time testing the Aston.
I will.
Do you know what tyres you're testing? Is it all
A lot of tires. I don't know yet which tires, but
it's 2025 tyres?
it will be 2025 tires. Yes.
Cool. Have a great time.
Your
TK,
neck is going to be brilliant.
How is the neck?
I'm gonna wake up sore. That's a guarantee.
Tom, thank you very much as well. Pleasure to have you guys on. And of course, for more reaction and analysis from Belgium, go to Formula1.com or the official Formula 1 app. And to get your tickets for races in the second half of this season, because we now have a bit of a break, the summer break is upon us. But from the Dutch Grand Prix in Zandvoort to Austin, Las Vegas and beyond, do head to tickets.formula1.com. And we will be back next Monday with an in-depth review of the season so far. But thank you for listening. F1 Nation is produced by Formula 1 and Audioboom Studios.